Is the Nintendo Switch 2 good enough to be your one and only gaming device? Gaming has become more expensive than ever. And for some players, that means making the choice of which platform you actually want to play on. I pose the question, if you only were going with one platform, whether by choice or necessity, is the Nintendo Switch 2 good enough? Of course, if you've seen the channel before, you'd know that while I think the Switch isn't the most capable handheld console, that it is more than able to be your primary gaming device. But then again, I could be wrong. Let's talk about it. When I was a kid, gaming was all about the newest tech. We were talking about how good Halo 2 looked, how insane Resident Evil 4 looked, and we were all excited looking at what was coming because of how good it looked or something that it was doing unique that we hadn't seen in 3D gaming before. And if you had cool parents or maybe an older brother, you were talking about Grand Theft Auto and how its open world that was as dynamic and free as it was pushing what gaming could be, and laughing at the, people you beat up with bats. That was fun. See, back then, the graphics in games was jumping rapidly. Just from 1995 to 2000, we went from this to this. That's just a 5-year period, shorter than the current gen life cycle, yet the leaps in graphics we were making were huge. Fast forward another 6 years, and we go from this to this. With the rise in HD gaming, suddenly games started to look how we always dreamed they could. To put that in perspective for the current day, here's what a game looked like 6 years ago, and here's what a game looks like now. Yeah, not much different. In fact, some games arguably looked better 6 years ago. Now, of course, there is still some growth in certain areas, and studios like Rockstar continually push the bounds for what these games can deliver. But I think it's more than safe to say that the days of huge graphical leaps the way we saw in older generations are just a thing of the past. We're now looking at things like ray tracing to provide that big visual leap. And while sometimes ray tracing can provide a much better look to a game, I honestly don't think the juice is even remotely worth the squeeze. Because ray tracing comes at a huge performance cost. And when you compare most implementations of the tech, I just don't think the change is drastic enough to justify the cost. For example, when I sit down to play a classic game these days, I'm almost always surprised by just how it holds up, how good it still looks. Games from the PS3 and onward largely hold up very well to this day, which shows you just how little we've gained as far as graphics go. That's not to say that things haven't pushed the envelope, of course they have, but it's still an enjoyable experience to sit down and play a PS3 or PS4 game. My point is, while we've grown strides in gameplay and quality of life improvements over the past few years, the graphics themselves have kind of hit a peak. Look at it like this. In the early days, we were rapidly scaling a mountain. And every time we made a new climb, we achieved some huge milestone in graphical technology. But at some point, we reached the peak of that mountain, and the only thing left to do was to build. Some decided to build outward and improve other aspects of gaming, and some chose to continue building upward, achieving better graphical fidelity, albeit at a much slower pace. As it turns out, the primary beneficiary of this has been Nintendo. See, back in the day when graphics were advancing so rapidly, Nintendo kind of struggled to keep up. Not that they couldn't, just they chose to put their time, effort, and resources into pursuing other ways to improve the gaming experience. Things like creating novel and interesting ways to interact with the games themselves. And there's also the matter of cost themselves. Nintendo always wanted to keep their consoles relatively affordable. And they kept an eye on the cost to develop the games themselves, something that is paying dividends in the current gaming climate. As a Nintendo gamer, you still had some of the most fun experiences possible in gaming. But you always knew that you were trading graphical fidelity for that Nintendo magic. But those days are a thing of the past. With the Switch 2, Nintendo has maintained their standard tenets that they followed for all of these years. You can interact with it in ways that you just can't with other platforms, and the price tag is still relatively affordable for current times. And you still get those same quirky, fun gaming experiences that we've grown to love over the decades. But now they're able to also offer comparable third-party experiences with only minor trade-offs. You can pick up a third-party AAA game on the Switch 2 and largely get a similar experience to any other platform. And that goes into the most important point here, and that's their ability to court these third-party developers. In years past, Nintendo just didn't have the ability and really the want or drive to court third-party developers to their platforms. But with the Switch 2, we're seeing that change, and finally, we're getting all of the third-party games that we always wanted. Well, we've already discussed how graphical fidelity has slowed in recent years, which has allowed Nintendo to catch up to the other platforms. And at times, it's actually surpassed the Xbox Series S. So I'd say we can safely check the does it have the chops box. The more interesting topic, in my opinion, is the performance. See, over the past few years, performance in gaming has become a huge point of contention for gamers. With the rise of PC gaming, players have got a taste of high frame rate gaming and just being able to brute force your way to all of the bells and whistles. And you would think a little handheld console like a Nintendo Switch just doesn't offer this. Well, the Switch 2 actually is capable of high frame rates. In fact, in handheld mode, its display is capable of 120 Hertz. Hertz and frame rate are interchangeable for this discussion. And more importantly, it supports VRR, or variable refresh rate, which is extremely helpful when you have a frame rate that is frequently fluctuating. Now, currently VRR is only available in handheld mode, but if this job listing is any indication, that won't be the case for much longer. But Peaceman, what about games that just can't hit 60 FPS? Games like Final Fantasy VII that are taxing even on much higher end systems. But here's where I might say something a little controversial. As I've gotten older, I really have cared less and less about the frame rate argument. I honestly care more if a game runs smoothly, and a well-paced 30 FPS is fine with me. I've been playing Grand Blue Fantasy Relink Endless Ragnarok. That's a mouthful. And it's a 30 FPS game on Switch, and it plays great. I'm having a ball. I'm playing with friends that are on the PlayStation 5, and we're doing the crossplay thing, and I don't feel like I'm getting a lesser experience than they are. In fact, I kind of feel like I'm getting a better experience because I can get up and stretch my legs and still play the raid. I'm not locked into one position. And if I want to be, then I can dock and play on the TV. As I've gotten older, I've just grown to really embrace just enjoying the game. And as long as the performance gets out of the way and allows me to do that, 30 FPS is okay with me. But of course, 60 FPS is better, and that's fine. And Nintendo is pushing that envelope. With games like Metroid Prime 4, they've actually done something Nintendo's never done before, and that is give us performance modes. I can choose a high fidelity, high resolution mode that sticks to 60 FPS, or I can choose to drop that resolution and fidelity and get up 120 frames. And that's more than enough for me. And I'm sure other games and developers are going to take advantage of that in the future. And a lot of Nintendo games already do have good frame rates. Donkey Kong Bonanza looks great and runs at a good 60 FPS. So I think that as long as the game's paced properly, 30 FPS is okay, and that doesn't really get in the way of me enjoying the game. Now, had you asked me that a couple of years ago, I probably would have given you a totally different answer. I was high on my PC horse, and I would have said that I'm not playing it if it's under 60. I'm getting 100 plus on plenty of games. Why would I sink down to the 30 FPS Switch level? That seems crazy. But again, you grow and you learn to value things differently, and I appreciate that the Switch just gives me what it is, and it's often more than good enough for me to enjoy the experience and not feel like I'm losing out on really anything. So, looping back to my question earlier, I posed, is the Switch 2 capable of being your primary gaming console? Your go-to platform where you play every game? Yes, I do in fact think that Switch 2 can easily be your primary console, and in fact I kinda think you're missing out if you don't have one. The benefits that I've found and covered in previous videos are just overwhelmingly positive and have influenced my gaming and ability to enjoy gaming to such a degree that I think the only option for a primary console right now, for me, is the Switch 2. And again, if you really like tinkering and you can really get into the Steam Deck or the Ally and the other PC handhelds, that's awesome, and I think they're great platforms as well. Having a platform that allows me to game on my own terms and just kind of gets out of the way and allows me to enjoy the game is huge for me. And the fact that it's providing a more than adequate experience for third-party games and games that I would generally experience on other platforms is kind of stunning. It means that for the first time in decades, I'm not really missing out on anything by choosing Nintendo as my primary platform. But there is actually one more reason why I think the Switch 2 is the best primary platform, and that's the Nintendo factor. It's why so many gamers have been die-hard Nintendo fans for decades now. And in fact, it's the sole reason why Nintendo has been insanely successful, despite not courting third-party developers until very recently. Nintendo's stable of first-party games are, in my opinion, the best in the world. And even if you prefer some of the more mature themes in Sony games, for example, you can't argue that the quality of Nintendo's first-party release is not top-notch. When Nintendo releases a new mainline Mario game or Legend of Zelda title, you know you're about to get a peak gaming experience. And they have offerings for everybody. Want something strategic and thoughtful? Play Fire Emblem. Want deep, rich storytelling with satisfying RPG mechanics? Try out the Xenoblade series. You have the bread and butter with adventure games like The Legend of Zelda, or platformers like Donkey Kong Bonanza and Super Mario Odyssey. Fighting games like Smash Brothers, or just good old party games. There's really nothing like pulling out the Switch when you have a bunch of friends over and you just want to play some Mario Party or Mario Kart. Really, as an adult, it's honestly kind of hard to hang out with other adults, especially having kids. When people come over, it used to always end up in this awkward spot where you're sitting around, you've already caught up on everything there is to catch up on, and you're just like, well, could be doing something more productive right now. But pulling out the Switch and just playing games, it's just fun. It gives us something to do. Not only does it bring back a little bit of that childhood that we all wish we could have back at this point, let's be honest, but it gives a really fun, memorable experience. I never feel like hanging out with friends is really a waste anymore. In fact, I actually look forward to it. And as a 34-year-old dad, that's saying something. So to summarize, I'd say that not only is the Nintendo Switch very capable of being your primary gaming platform, but that it is the best gaming platform. And I doubt that changes anytime soon. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.